What's up, guys? Let's go ahead and talk about the iPhone 13 Pro versus the iPhone 13 here. So, $1,000 for the 13 Pro and $800 for the 13. Do you really need the 13 Pro, or are you just going to be fine with the 13? That's what we are going to find out here. Let's talk about hardware, because I think this is kind of a significant difference. And again, it's kind of a petty thing, but they both are glass and metal designs here, but there are slight differences. So you have a glass back on the 13 with an aluminum frame, and then you have a glass matte back on the 13 Pros. And you can see they don't pick up any fingerprints, and they have that matte finish on it. And I really like this because, you know, it just doesn't pick up fingerprints. As far as the metal, you do have an aluminum frame on the 13, and then you have a stainless steel frame on the 13 Pro, so that's kind of a difference. As far as the weight, the 13 Pro does feel heavier than the 13, so that's one thing I noticed. And then as far as like the size, they both are pretty much the same height and width here. So you can see the button layout, and again, pretty much the same button layout here. Alright, guys, let's get into the display difference here, because this is going to be an essential difference here. So on the 13 Pro, we do have the 120 Hertz Retina XDR OLED display. It's HDR10, 6.1 inches, 1170 by 2532 resolution, 460 for the PPI. We have the exact same display on the standard 13 here. It does have a different spec when it comes to brightness. So it's 800 nits on the 13, and then 1200 nits peak, and then you have 1000 nits on the 13 Pro with 1200 nits peak. So that is one spec difference, but really it comes down to, and I don't want to get too technical here, but they're both literally the same displays when you look at them color wise. The difference here is the high refresh rate. So basically the 13 Pro is going to be a much smoother device when you're scrolling here. Now, I will say, once you see a high refresh rate display, you won't be able to go back to any type of 60 hertz display. So basically, you'll notice that when you're in Instagram or pretty much doing anything, when you're scrolling, you will notice that the 12 Pro feels extremely silky smooth. And it's not that the 13 does not feel smooth. It feels also very smooth also for 60 hertz, but it's just nowhere near as smooth as the 60 hertz. It just feels extremely fluid. So that is a big major difference here between these two phones. Again, it's something that if I handed you both these phones, and just if you're a regular person, it would be really hard for you to tell right off the bat, because it's something that you kind of have to look for. But once you see it and you notice it, you won't be able to go back to 60 hertz. Also, there will be, games that are going to be compatible with 120 hertz as well when they get updated. So if you're a gamer, that's something to consider as well. But the display difference is going to be kind of like the major difference between these two phones, really. Alright, guys, let's go ahead and talk about these specs a little bit more. I'll pull up the Geekbench scores here so we can talk about that. But they both have iOS 15, and they both have the Apple A15 chip. Where the difference is you have 128 gigs of storage on both of these phones, but you have 6 gigs of RAM, and then you have 4 gigs of RAM on the 13 here, and you will get a slightly higher score here. So technically, the 13 Pro should be slightly faster than the 13, but it's not anything that's going to be realistic. I mean, I guess that's kind of noticeable, but let's keep going. So that's not really noticeable. So there is technically no real speed difference, but you will see a difference. If I launch like a ton of applications, I'm pretty sure the 13 Pro will be able to keep more applications in memory, but that's pretty much the difference there. I guess we see kind of a slight difference, more so in heavier games, but really, I mean, honestly, it's not that big of a difference. A PUBG. So the thing about gaming with these two phones is that they both are going to pretty much game identical as well. You'll be able to play pretty much any game at max settings. Where the difference does lie is with the display. So again, that 120 Hz, when games start to become updated to take advantage of the high refresh rate, then you have, you know, smoother gameplay on the 13 Pro. So I guess it does have that advantage. But right now, there's not a lot of games that support, you know, the screen yet. But if you guys want to check out the settings here for PUBG, there should be a 90 FPS option coming for the 13 Pro, I would assume. It's not here yet, but I can go all the way up to Ultra HD. Let's just get into a game. So what makes these models pretty good now for gaming is that the notch is slightly smaller. So it's not as big of a distraction as it was with the iPhone 12. I mean, 13 actually booted in this game first. But if you guys check out my gaming test, you guys will be able to see that both of these phones play games really well. I don't know why this is taking so long to boot up into a match. Alright, so both phones have stereo speakers. Let's go ahead and see if we can spot a difference, if there's any difference between the speaker quality or loudness. Alright, so yeah, that's what I thought. They both have identical speakers, so the 13 Pro is not going to be louder than the 13. They both sound pretty much identical there. So I've actually been really impressed with the speakers and the vibrations on both these phones. They are really nice. They have really good motor in them for the vibrations, and the speakers have a ton of bass and they sound really crisp and clear, so I really enjoy the speakers on both of these guys. Alright, so both of these phones do have Face ID on them, and they pretty much open the, at the same speed, so one is not faster than the other. They both do a really good job with that. They both have IP68 dust and water resistant, and they both have NFC with Apple Pay as well. Alright guys, I want to go ahead and break down the cameras, because this is going to be the biggest difference. This is the most noticeable thing that most people are going to see. I have a triple camera setup on the 13 Pro and a dual camera setup on the 13. So let's start off with the 13 Pro and talk about what it has that the 13 does not have. Alright, so let's just go over the specs real quick. We have a 12 megapixel standard, a 12 megapixel telephoto, and then a 12 megapixel ultra wide, and we also have a macro mode on the 13 Pro, which the standard 13 does not have, and it does not have the telephoto lens as well. That telephoto does do 3x optical zoom. We also have 4K video at 24, 30, or 60 FPS, and then a 12 megapixel selfie at 30, 24, and 60 FPS as well here. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys the difference. It's the same exact camera specs, it's just that you don't have the telephoto or a macro mode on the 13. So as you can see, that 3x option right there, you can see I can zoom in. I don't have that option on the standard 13. Take a photo. Now, as you can see, I have the ultra wide on both of these guys as well. Image quality is exactly the same. So from what I've seen, and I can do a full camera comparison for you guys, but they both take the exact same images. There's no difference in terms of image quality here, like at all. You won't be able to notice the difference. So I want to show you guys the macro mode on the 13 Pro. Again, that's something you don't have. So basically the macro mode, it allows you to get up really close, and if you get up really close to a subject, it'll go ahead and switch, as you saw. I don't know if you guys saw that animation, but I'll do it again. You see it kind of switches, it does a mode. I can get up super close, right? And try to take a photo of his feet. Try to get up as close as possible. Alright. You can see I get a really cool, really sharp, really nice looking macro photo. And it does that with the ultra wide lens, I believe. So on the 13, if I tried to take that shot, if I wanted to take a really close-up shot of something, there's no way I could do it. You can see it's super blurry. Even if I try to focus, I can't do it. So the 13 cannot do these close-up shots. So the only way you would kind of get away with that is if I did a zoom in like that and take a photo. But it's not going to look as good because it's basically a digital zoom, so it doesn't look as crisp. If I like come into the shot here, you can see it kind of looks a little blurry, and it lacks a lot of detail. And I can honestly get closer. I can get way closer than what I got right there. So that's also something to note. Alright guys, let's go ahead and talk about the battery life. So if you do need the absolute most battery life, the 13 Pro is definitely going to be the way to go. You will get about an hour more screen on time than you will on the standard 13, which is really awesome. So both of these phones have wireless charging as well as the MagSafe wireless charging as well. Now, that's not to say that the 13 battery is not good. Both of these phones will last you all day, but like I said, you are going to get that extra hour of screen on time with the 13 Pro here. So that is pretty much it. So just to, sum it up pretty much, the big difference here is the 120 Hertz, also the extra telephoto lens, and also the macro mode on here. You do have ProRes video on the 13 Pro. It is coming, but it's not actually here yet. Apple has to release the software update. And then you have the matte finish on the 13 Pro, which I really like. And then the slightly better battery life. But other than that, that's pretty much it. There's not a massive difference with these two phones, but it's very, things for, certain people that, you may or may not appreciate. It really just depends on the person. So what do you guys think? Be sure to let me know, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.